I saw one skull and one entire skeleton in Virginia City at the Old West Museum in Virginia City. It's probably not there anymore. He had a skull from the cave, and it was big. It was a big skull, not like a giant, like 3-foot tall thing or nothing, but it was a big skull, full skull, mandible, the whole deal, and it was from Lovelock Cave.
Online here with us, we got Marcos Many Dogs, who contacted me quite a while ago concerning Brewer's Cave, the Giants, and some other things, and he was saying some things to me that was a little bit different than what everybody else is. I've been hearing from everybody else. So with that said, Marcos, let's take it away and just give me what your research has been on the Giants and what your philosophy and what your research and what you've come up with.
All right, sounds good, Terry. Well, I started researching about the so-called giants about 35 years ago, more or less, and I focused my original investigations in the area around Lovelock, Nevada. I did a lot of book researching, first of all, in regards to these people, and started finding out just all kinds of info that basically there was a whole nother race of Native Americans here before the natives that we commonly know of, that I have a good chunk of that blood in me. They came later on, and there was already an existing civilization here, advanced as far as metallurgy and this and that and some other things go. And over the years, there was kind of a genocidal program instigated, and there was a lot of interbreeding too. When the Spanish came here, the conquistadores in the 16th century and beyond, their chronicles, like Bernal Diaz del Castillo and Coronado and all those guys, almost all of them mention that the leaders of a lot of the native tribes that they encountered from Alabama to Peru had very tall leaders, sometimes 8 feet, well over the height of the Spanish. And so I got real interested in all this stuff and started studying about the group that was exterminated by the Paiutes. I think it's the Southwest Paiutes, I believe. It's the ones that are around that. Huh?
Yeah, and that's what caught my attention, because what you told me was a lot different than what everybody else has been telling me. So, yeah, tell us what you figure happened there.
Okay, well, the closest place for me to go to start studying these ancient native, people with red hair and that were 8-9 feet tall, so the closest place for me to get to, I was in Northern California at the time, closest place was a town called Lovelock, where Lovelock Cave is. So I went, first of all, I went to Reno to the Historical Society Museum and Library there, and it was a good hot day, so it was nice and cool in there. I spent like half the day in there doing research. And I found a lot of information by a fellow named John T. or John C. Reed, who was a mining engineer in the Lovelock area back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. His father, whose name I forget right now, had a big cattle ranch there. And on that big cattle ranch right outside of Lovelock there, anyway, when John was a boy, one of the head guys working on his father's cattle ranch was Natchez Winnemucca. Natchez Winnemucca was the brother of Sarah Winnemucca, who was Chief Winnemucca's daughter and son. And so Natchez and John Reed were good buddies, and Natchez was older, and they were out trying to gather some strays out wrangling, I guess, one day or whatever, and Natchez said, "Come here, I'll show you something. We're pretty close to this cave." So he took John over to Lovelock Cave and told John the story as he heard it from his family on down through the years. At several hundred years before that, the last of a group of tall, red-haired native people that had inhabited that land. It's all desert now. It used to be marshland a long time ago, and before that it was a big, huge inland lake like Salt Lake. But when it was a marshland and there was a lot of game birds and fish and everything there, Paiutes came in and settled into that area, there was already some people living there, and they started having some trouble between them. And the Paiutes say that these people, who they call in their language the Siteka, that they would catch their people, catch the Paiutes and kill them and eat them, and even in some cases dig up the dead Paiutes and eat them and all this. And so they went to war, and the Paiutes confederated with some of the other Washoe people and some of the other Paiute tribes in the area, and they went on an extermination binge. And the last group, not just Winnemucca, told John Reed that the last group of those tall red-haired natives were driven into this cave, and the mouth of the cave was stuffed with sagebrush and brambles, and the Paiutes said, "Come out and fight," and died by arrows and clapped their cave to death in there. Nobody lit the sagebrush on fire. And John said that he said that he saw charcoal stains on the roof of the cave, and that there was arrowheads stuck still in the clay of it wasn't all solid rock. It was like a clay, kind of a wash, where when the coast of the lake had been up that high, it was kind of a wash, kind of a cave like that. So there was like clay, and there was still arrowheads and maybe parts of old rotten arrows stuck in there. And then John started researching on those people and stuff, and found a lot of stuff around there when he was going out. He was an amateur archaeologist, and found a lot of petroglyphs. In Churchill County, which is right close to there.
Yep, it's right close.
Yeah, there's petroglyphs. I saw the pictures of them in the Reno library there. And there's petroglyphs all over the place. Just all over these boulders. I didn't go out to see those or anything, but John C. Reed got interested in those and did a lot of work on those. Well, the thing that was interesting in Sarah Winnemucca's book, Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, she married a U.S. cavalry captain, I think. His last name was Hopkins. And so she was, later she was Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins. And like I said, she was royalty. She was the daughter of Chief Winnemucca, who Winnemucca, Nevada is named after. So she wrote a book. I forget when the book was wrote, but on page 123 of that book, it was titled, I believe, The Paiutes, My People, or My Life with the Paiutes, My People, or something like that. She only wrote one book as far as I know, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. She talks about these people, the Siteka, the tall, red-haired people that were there when the Paiutes came, and she lays a story out how they were cannibals and this and that, and how her people exterminated them and they killed off the last of them in that cave. With all this is, I have one major beef with this. And first of all, I've seen the artifacts from those people, and they were very skilled at making decoys from rushes, from cattails and stuff. They made the most exquisite decoys I'd ever seen. Yep. They had a basket for
duck decoys. It was duck decoys, and yeah.
Yep, and they would skin the head of the duck, and then they would make a ceramic or a clay head, and then they would taxiderm. And I saw these. They were right there in the museum. And then they had atlatl. If anyone knows what atlatls are, atlatl is like a way to throw darts. It's kind of like a sling kind of a deal. And I saw some of those. And then these people, they wore moccasins, but they didn't survive, I guess. What did survive was a type of footwear that no other Indians made or wore. And these were sandals made of straw, and they were woven. And none of the other Indians that I know of made those kind of shoes. And they found a bunch of those in the cave. Now, that cave had a lot of back guano in it. And around the turn of the century, there was a family called the Greens. They lived in Lovelock, and they figured, that back guano, a lot of people will buy that for a special fertilizer. We can make some buckets here,
Yep.
So they went out, the Green brothers and a few other guys, and they started mining the guano out of the Lovelock Cave. Well, as soon as they got down a few feet, they started finding all kinds of neat stuff. Baskets and feather bolas, colored feather bolas made from the migratory birds that inhabited that area when it was a swamp. That these feather bolas and feather items were described as being at rival, with what the Aztecs made. Now, I lived in Mexico City, and I'd seen the Aztec featherwork in the museums down there, the Aztec featherwork. It's something to see. It is something to see. And although they didn't have any tropical birds right around Nevada, they had all kinds of ducks, teals, and every color of feather you can imagine, and to make the feather work with. So they had all this stuff, the decoys, bows and arrows, you name it, they had it. And they stored it all in the Green Brothers garage or carriage house in Lovelock. Well, mysteriously, a fire started, strangely enough. Some agent of the what's that outfit, Smithsonian, I guess. Anyway, all that stuff burnt, strangely enough, mysterious.
So you're saying that the large skeletons that they found also burnt?
No.
Okay.
The skeletal remains, they I don't know what they found. The skeletal remains, they were from 6 to 8.5 feet tall. They found about 60 of them altogether. And they had red, there was no meat left on the bone, of course, but they found plenty of long red hair, and male and female skeletal remains, and then not much of the clothing was left. They found a lot of straw stuff. They didn't find any buckskin or anything like that, as far as I know. Little bit, maybe a little bit. I'm trying to think of what items made out of leather they might have found. They found a lot of baskets. They found a lot of that feathers stuff. I guess that didn't rot away. And they found some bottles, some bows and arrows, a lot of arrowheads, heck of a lot of arrowheads. And anyway, all that stuff was stored in the Green Brothers garage in the town of Lovelock. And somehow the word got out. It made the newspaper, local newspaper there, probably in Reno as well. And then in 1912, I think, Berkeley, the anthropological department of University of California at Berkeley, sent out 2 guys. I think their name was Loud and Howe, 2 anthropologists, if I'm not mistaken, Loud and Howe. And there was a book published. I took it out of the library once that those 2 anthropologists published with pictures in it of all the stuff they found a bunch of stuff. Bunch of skeletal remains. Now, I've seen some of those skeletal remains. I didn't get to go in the back room like David Hatcher Childress did in the Lovelock Museum and see the skulls. They had a couple skulls back there. I didn't know about them, or I would have begged, borrowed, and stole to get back there. But I did not see those. But in Virginia City, back in the day, they're probably under the Native American, buried people that aren't even related to you act.
Yeah, the NAFTA Repatriation Act. Yep.
Yeah, which I think,
not NAFTA, sorry, NAGPRA. NAGPRA, yeah.
NAGPRA, well,
yeah.
I think that is if it's your people, that's one thing. These are not their people. These are a whole different race of people in every way you can. I took anatomy. I was a pre-med major for a while. I know different characteristics of bone structure and all that stuff, and these are not. These are very large. I saw one skull and one entire skeleton in Virginia City at the Old West Museum in Virginia City. It's probably not there anymore. The guy that owned that museum back in the day had a nice collection he put together. It was free to go in there. You could give a donation, but he had a skull from the cave, and it was big. It was a big skull, not like a giant, 3-foot tall thing or nothing, but it was a big skull, full skull, mandible, the whole deal, and it was from Lovelock Cave, reportedly. And then
did it have
right down the street.
Did it have the double row of teeth and stuff? Do you know that?
No. I didn't see, Terry. All I saw was the front part of the teeth. But as far as I know, it didn't have double dentition. No, none of the. As far as I know, none of the skeletal remains found at Lovelock Cave had double dentition. Just to throw in a little tidbit, Geronimo, the Apache chief, he supposedly had double dentition. There's a number of people nowadays that have it. It's not like you're a Nephilim. It's just a genetic quirk that happens to some people sometimes.
Uh-huh.
So, no, but this. So I saw that skull in the Old West Museum there on Main Street in Virginia City, and then across the street. Speaking
of genetic quirks, they talk about the 6 fingers and 6 toes. Well, I went to school with a kid that, when he was born, he had 6 digits, and they cut it off so that, he wouldn't be a freak, so.
I'm not a religious person, so to speak. I'm spiritual, can't help that. But I do believe in a lot of what's in the Bible. It just jumps out at you as being true. And I have to say that I do think that there was some interaction between some, you want to call them heavenly beings, higher dimensional beings, the Watchers, whatever you want to call them. I think they came down and they messed around with the human genotype, and there was a lot of problems due to that. Roll the dice. I think there was, like it says in the Bible, that the offspring of the sons of heaven and the daughters of men, some of them were the men of old, the men of renown, and it's positive. It's like they were the great heroes, But also on the flip side of that, you got the other side of the coin. You got the mess ups, the bad product of the breeding of the heavenly ones, the Watchers, whatever you want, humankind. You had, some of these giants I heard were, we're talking about 8-9 footers. That's not really much of a giant to me, because Klaus Dono, who's somebody I follow his work pretty intensely, he's got evidence to show that they were up to 6.5 meters tall. That's like 24, 25 feet. That's a big boy. I'd like to have him on the line on my football team,
That's crazy, and that's hard for me to believe. And I derailed you when I talked to you about the 6 digits, so man, because I want you to get back to the Lovelock Giants and the meat eaters and how they was eating the.
Well, that's what it was said, and unfortunately, there's other Indians also that say that these giant people, they call them cloud eaters and this and that. There's other things, talk, chismoso in Spanish means gossip about these giants being cannibals. However, I got to make a point here, and I think it's an important one. The Paiute word for these people is sitika. Sitika. It means eaters of the tules. And you would think that if these guys were cannibals and exterminated because of that they wouldn't be called tule eaters. They'd be called people eaters or something terrible. They wouldn't be called, You can eat cattails. You can eat certain plants that grow out there. I used to know about all this stuff. But so these people were a pretty high-level culture going. They had been there quite a while before the Paiutes came, and I guess the Paiutes noticed that they were harvesting tules and eating the cattails or part of them, I don't know what. And I guess that's how they named them that. What I think is this, and I've got Indian blood, so I'm not picking on the Indians. But the deal is I think what happened was it was a scurry over hunting rights. I think when the Paiute people started filling in that area, the Humboldt Sink region is what I'm talking about up there, where the Humboldt River is. That was all one big, huge lake, then it turned into marshlands, and now it's all desert pretty much. That over time, there was a squabble over, hunting rights, and there was a lot more Paiutes and Paiute-related people than there were Sitka, and the Sitka ate it. They ended up getting took out of the picture because there isn't any evidence at all they were cannibals. They're just, except for the Paiutes saying it, there isn't any evidence to that effect at all. They didn't find any when they dug Lovelock Cave up. They didn't find any split human bones or anything like that, to the best of my knowledge. So I'm going to have to kind of stick with the Sitka being the victims here in this one, and I just, I went on the Paiute Res there. I was up, when I went investigating all this, I went on the Paiute Res and hung out there for a little bit. Nobody up there knew anything about this.
Yeah.
They're real nice folks.
Yeah.
Real, nice people, friendly and everything, but they just didn't know anything about any of this, so it didn't do me no good. But, these people have been found. These were the mound builder people, the same people that are in Brewer's Cave. I have no doubt. The only thing was, Terry, there was no, to the best of my knowledge, and I did my homework on this, there was no metal artifacts found at Lovelock Cave. Everything was either stone, maybe some wood and basketry, maybe some leather. I think there was some leather stuff, few outlaws found, little this and that. Sarah Winnemucca had a dancing shirt that was handed down to her family that was made out of, it was from these people. These people used to use their own hair, the Sipeka, the tall red-haired people, use their own hair often to make things. And like that one fella you interviewed on there, Oliver, I think his name was, up in Silver City, I just remember wanting to get a hold of him. But the thing was, he was talking about a cave he found at University of New Mexico.
With the 24 arrows stuck around a rock and a big fish net made out of human hair and woven sandals and...
Right, exactly. The same sandals I was talking about. As a matter of fact,
Louis Osmer.
Osborne, okay.
Osmer, O-S-M-E-R.
I was close. These people, the Sipeka people, were all over the place. Now, my uncle, years ago, he was a foreman on his father-in-law's big spread near Lakeview, Oregon. One of the biggest spread. They raise mostly wheat, but they raise cattle and other stuff too. So my uncle ran that ranch for his father-in-law. Now, when my uncle got older, he bought a restaurant called the Indian Village in the town of Lakeview. He bought it from a guy named Robert Ogle, who was one of the country's foremost collectors of Native American stuff. He had full eagle feather headdresses that were worn by the chiefs that were in Buffalo Bill's Wild West. I saw those myself. They were in his office.
Huh.
And above every booth in the restaurant, there was a big, like a portrait-sized picture frame with a cotton backing with an arrowhead design in it. And this area up there around Lakeview, I'd never found. I'd go up there arrowhead hunting and just, one day I was only picking up the ones that were made out of red obsidian. I was even any other colored arrowheads in the dirt. I just picking up the ones that were part red obsidian or all red. And that's my uncle in the restaurant had a pair of those sandals. I remember seeing those and thinking, wow, I was only 9 years old or something, but I'm thinking, well, those aren't moccasins. Those are woven. They're made out of straw, and I'm thinking, well, how could that protect your feet very good? But he had and it said they were 10,000 years old.
Wow.
Those were found in a cave near Lakeview, Oregon. Now, Lakeview's in the central Oregon, right across the California border. That whole area, I believe the whole these people, Terry, they were all the way down into South America big time, because there's still red-haired Indians that show up in the Andes Mountains. And other Indians know all about them. And then the Incas told the Spanish that there was these tall people before the Incas came that were there already, and they were bearded and they had red hair. And so this is nothing new or local. It's just when I started researching it. It just so happened I had heard about the Lovelock Cave before I found out about everything else, and it was close. It was only a couple hours.
What year was it you started researching this?
Probably 1982, maybe, something like that.
Because I can remember, when I found out about Brewer's Cave, thinking it wasn't real because, they talk about these two giants in there, and I'd never heard of such a thing about giants. And, it's before the internet, to find something on the giants, it wasn't easy to do. There wasn't a lot of information out there. So for you to start studying in 1982, that's amazing to me.
Well, let me tell you the story. It was pretty short. My dad, we used to go up to Lake Tahoe and spend our summers, spend a few weeks every summer. And my dad was a real mountain guy. My grandparents built a resort in Trinity County in Northern California, quite a ways from Lake Tahoe. But my dad loved the mountains, grew up on horseback, taking people on pack trips. So did my uncle, and they used to pan for gold and all this stuff. So we always went up. Where my grandparents built the resort was like 7-8 hours away from Santa Rosa, where I grew up. So we didn't want to go that far every summer for vacations. We'd go up to Lake Tahoe. Some friends of my dad owned a resort there, and then later my folks bought a cabin at Donner Lake, which is 16 miles from Lake Tahoe. Well, my dad was an avid gambler. He liked to shoot craps and play blackjack, and he won all the time. He and my uncle just cleaned up. And there was a book that we had in our little library at home that was produced by Harris Club, which is a well-known casino in that area.
Uh-huh.
And my dad, I don't know how he got it, but he went to Harris Club all the time and Harold's Club and all those. So this book was in our little library, and it was called Pioneer Nevada. And it had all these stories in it. It was a big book, like a telephone book, and it had easy to read for a kid and everything. It had all these stories about, gold mines and ghosts and all this stuff. Well, in there, that's how I heard about the Siteka. There was a story, the basic story about the Siteka people. And when I read that, that just lit a fire under me, and I was only a kid, like 9 or 10, but that just laid in me until I was reading Louis L'Amour books, and a buddy of mine told me about. Have you ever read that story about that book, The Californios by Louis L'Amour? I said no. And he goes, well, you ought to read it. So in there, Louis was an amateur archaeologist. He had over 1,000 books in his private library, and he was one of my favorite authors. So I read The Californios, and he talked about the White Indians in there, and that the secret cave where you could go somewhere in California, you could go into another dimension there, or you could take some gold out of the stone pot, a little gold that would always be in there, and the voice would ask you if you went in there, and says, do you wish to pass over? And you would say, no, I just came for the gold. And then you could take the gold. There wasn't a lot, but enough to get you through an emergency, I guess. So that was in his book, The Californians. Well, I was going to write to Louis, and I was planning to do it and everything, and I was, dead set on doing it. Well, a buddy of mine said, well, you're too late to write to Louis. He died of cancer 4 days ago. So I didn't never get to hook up with Louis L'Amour. But that kicked me in the rear again to start researching, and then within a couple years, I got a book called Weird America. You can't get it anymore. They must have squished that somewhere. You can't get it. It's by a guy named Jim Brandon. It's called Weird America. In that book, he talks about a cave under Lexington, Kentucky, that Daniel Boone's party found in the late 1700s, where there were 60-something mummies in a big cave, tall, red-haired. The same thing just kept coming back and back and back, and then I kept hearing about the mounds when the Smithsonian swooped on all the time, that 8-9-footers that they found in the mound burials with red hair. And I just got infatuated with these people. And I said, well, the closest place I know to go where they found anything is Lovelock, Nevada, in that area. So I headed on out there and started. I spent a few days. I didn't spend a whole lot of time. But that whole area, Mount Shasta, that area, there's a lot of talk about those people up in that area around Devil's Post Pile and into Nevada. As a matter of fact, they found a big mummy, a tall 7-8-footer, I forget, in the desert there, but it was where the lake had been, Humboldt Lake had been in the old days, and I don't know how they found it. Oh, I think it was when they were putting the railroad tracks in there. They were digging out to put the railroad tracks, and they found a bunch of stuff at different times. But they found a big mummy there, red-haired mummy. So these people were all over the place. The Mandan Indians up in Ohio, they no longer exist because they were able to easily assimilate into white civilization because they were mostly white. They were descendants of these people, and they kept fairly well pure. Governor Clark of the Lewis and Clark expedition, he was governor of Ohio for a while. When he handed his hat over, so to speak, to the new governor, he wrote him a letter, which I read a copy of that, and he told the new governor, he goes, you will find the Mandan people, like I said, they no longer exist. There's no tribal group called the Mandans. They don't exist anymore. But Governor Clark wrote to the new governor. I don't know the new governor's name. This is 1820 or 30, something like that. He said, you will find the Mandan people very interesting, very, very peaceful, very intelligent, and you will almost not be able to distinguish them from the whites.
Huh.
And said, it's a very strange phenomenon to me, Governor Clark says, that there has not been enough time for them to integrate so much with the white colonists, like the French and whoever came into that area from Europe, for them to become so white as they have become, like many having green and blue eyes and, reddish blonde hair and the such. So That's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with suppressed information, and these guys that want to suppress all this information, Terry, they love it when they can get the Indians all riled up about reburying artifacts. You know, that just gets. You know,
I never thought about that, but yeah, you're exactly right. So I want to ask you this because I've been here. You know, I haven't been a great studier of the Giants. I've been studying of trying to figure out how to get into Brewer's Cave to see if they're real. That's what I've spent my time doing. But I've been hearing a lot lately. You know, the Giants, the Nephilim. They were evil. They were here to destroy and whatnot. But I heard something different from you. You're saying, which goes against everything I've heard from everybody else. So I'm sure this is going to be real controversial. But you're saying these Nephilim, these giants, they were the good people.
You know what? Here's what I believe and think. You know, what group, okay, my buddy quarter Japanese and 3/4 Mexican. You know, his nickname's Sushi Bean, okay? He's my best friend. I'm half Austro-Hungarian. I had family that fought for Hitler over there on my dad's. I never knew him, but one was an SS officer and this and that. I know that my family are basically good people. Manny knows that his family are basically good people, but I know for a fact the Japanese did terrible stuff to people during the war, and I know that Germans and Austrians did terrible stuff to people during the war, and I know that Eisenhower, once the Allies took over Germany, go on YouTube and find out about the concentration camps that the Germans were put in after the war. That there wasn't even any buildings. They dug holes in the ground. It was in the early spring, and they froze to death or fell in the latrines and drowned. Go on there and check that. That's man's inhumanity to man. And what's the first thing they do when you join the military? You know, the first thing they do is, first of all, they break you down to your basic constituents, all right? They break you down into nothing. Then they dehumanize the enemy, okay? So here's what I think. I think everybody and every group of people has good and bad in them.
I would agree with that, yeah.
You know, same way with these giants. I can look back at me. I've never done anything really too terrible, but I've done my share of bad stuff. Rock. And, I'm ashamed of it, and I've paid my dues, I hope, and I've changed from what it does. But, you know, I think it's the same way with these giants, Terry. I think some were... you look at the God in the Old Testament. You know, I don't worship anything. I worship Great Spirit, and that's everything that is. That's the whole deal. We can get into that some other time. But basically speaking, if you're really into the Bible, and I have one and I use it, but you look at God of the Old Testament, and he's like a human being on steroids. So it's the way I think about these giants. I think that they were sometimes probably very bad, and sometimes very, very good. Look, Robert Shrewsbury, by the way, Robert, if you listen to this, I hope you find it in your heart to talk to me sometime, because you're the one guy I'd really like to spit out over the line here, buddy. He was talking about that Navajo buddy of his. No, I don't know if he was a Navajo. He was an old sheep herder or something. Well, anyway, that there was a giant that came down, one of these native giants I'm talking about, came down on one of the, you know what I'm getting
Yep.
one of the Navajo reses. He knew it was his time to die, and he just wanted to party with the Navajos a little bit. Then he did for a week, whatever. Then he went up to wherever he went to and died. And he was one of the last ones. And, then you look at, like all the different, stuff they found. They found, of course, like Brewer's Cave. I believe that's true, and it just goes in line with the other discoveries that they found that the Smithsonian mysteriously swoops up on. By the way, the Smithsonian is an extension of the Vatican. Okay,
Really?
I'll tell you right now, and I'm not going to tell you how I know that, or believe me, take it to the bank. I guess keeping people stupid, we're easier to control if we're dumber and believe a lot of lies and everything, But the thing is with the giant people is the way I see it is there was all kinds of different giants. Just like you have all kinds of different people, and some of them were like that one. Okay, let's get on the Kandahar one because that was something I definitely wanted to bring up. If you listen to Steve Quayle, and L.A. Marzulli talks about it too on there, apparently, and Steve has a lot of informants. A lot of people go to Steve. You know, I've got some issues with him, but I like him basically. They were all a bunch of old guys, you know. L.A. Marzulli's a year older than me. Steve's about the same age I am. Tom Horn's 3 years older than me. David Ike's a year younger than me. You're a kid, Terry. You're one of the
I think I'm old enough to be your dad. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you're old enough to be my little brother. You're not even quite. Well, yeah, you are. You're about the same age as my little brother. But the thing was, okay, apparently in Afghanistan in 2006, I think it was, these guys went up, a special forces team. I think there was 8 in the group. I'm not sure. They went up there, and they went up to where this big giant, red-haired giant, one of the old folks was living, and they went up there to take, the Taliban was up there, because there was a lady that was bringing food up to this cave, and they go, oh, we got us a hot nest of Taliban, let's go murder all these Taliban, let's go murder these fundamentalist Muslims in their country, you know, doing what they're doing because they're living by their religion and being true. So let's go murder them so we can keep growing our opium and making heroin and keeping all the wrong people rich and powerful. Okay, so they went up there thinking they were going to find a nest full of Taliban. You know, just like the guys in Nam thinking they were going to find a whole underground cave system full of Viet Cong. So they went up there. No, they didn't find any Taliban. They got like a 12 or 14 foot, I forget how tall, one of them 2-foot red-haired giant come out of there, and he sees all these guys with guns, and, you know, judging that their intentions were not good, and this is his crib, this is his place, okay? Him having the strength and the size and wherewithal to do, you know, if that happened to me, I don't know, I'm not a very big guy, I've got one Civil War reproduction pistol. I couldn't put up much of a fight, but apparently this giant could, and he wiped out, I guess, the whole company. I guess there was 8 guys, I think. I'm not sure. But so the first special forces group that went up there, they got took out. So they sent another one up with a warning of what they were going to encounter up there, and they killed the giant. Not before the giant skewered 1 or 2 of them. And they killed him. They put him on they got him back. They airlifted him out with a big helicopter, and then they brought him back to, I think, Wright-Patterson Air Force. That seems to be where all the weird woo stuff goes. But several guys that knew about, that were involved with this, one of the guys was the transport. You know, he wasn't involved with the actual hit on the giant, but he was, what's the C-60? What's the big cargo planes?
I don't know.
C-60, I think. I forget. But anyway, he was one of the crew on the C-60, and they weighed the giant. He weighed like 1,000 pounds, I think. Yeah, he was on a pallet, and they deducted 150 for the pallet and the tarp. And yeah, they were told, they said, shoot high, and the bullets weren't having much of an effect on him until they pretty much took his head off with the, I don't know what they were firing, AR-15s or M16s or AKs, I don't know what they had, but they took the giant out, and they shipped him back probably to do some take some genetic samples for their super soldier program or something beautiful and lovely and sweet and heavenly like that. But anyway, so the way I look at it is like this. That lady was feeding that giant. If he was a cannibal, evil SOB or whatever, the people that live in the Afghanis would have known it. That giant got up an artery because a squad went up there to take his stuff out. And so he did what I would do, and I hope you would do, and any red-blooded Americano would do if there's someone to come and on your place, on your land, in your space, and do you harm, serious harm, like take your life. I'm sorry. I have to, when I found out the details that they found out about this guy because this lady was helping him, before that I thought, well, yeah, maybe he was a cannibal, maybe he was. Then I thought to myself, well, I've known several Afghani people in my life, and they're not stupid. That they're the people I knew. They were, pretty strict Muslims, but they were very good people. You know, they're not stupid. They wouldn't let, and they're bad. I mean, the Afghanis, they got heart. They'll fight. You know, if you do them wrong, you know. And I've had some Palestinian friends. They're the same way. They're the best people in the world. Don't get them ticked off at you, and they won't get ticked off for anything real sweet and easy. I mean, you got to, you know, really disrespect them. But they got heart. You know, not like most of us TV watching Captain Crunch punching, you know, American door sliders. But anyway, the fact remains is that, you know, the Afghans had no beef with this guy. Some Afghan lady was beating him, helping him out, and I think he was trying to hide out so the Americans wouldn't find him, because the Afghans, I think they knew all about him, and he, you know, just like the Indians did with that one Robert was talking about. You know, he came down to party with him before he died, and there was no, according to Robert, at least on that spit he did on that you got there. He, you know, he just said that he came down to party with the Navajos. He knew his time was coming, and he wanted to have a little human companionship. Because I don't care how big he is, he's a human being.
Right.
I don't care how little, you know, like Dr. Evil, or the little clone of Dr. Evil in that. I forget that movie, that funny movie with Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Anyway, that little guy, you know, he's a little guy, but he's a human being. You know, just because he's little doesn't mean he's, you know, weird or not a human.
Yep.
Well, if you're just the opposite, if you're 14 foot tall, you know, well, I don't care how big you are, just don't use my bathroom, please. You know. It's just, you know, what kind of person are you? You know, that's all I really care about. You know, what kind of a human being are you? Because I've had all kinds of different. I've lived in 5 different countries. I've known human beings of every shape, color, size, gender, some in between genders, you know, whatever, you know. And it's all about what's your soul like, not your body so much. Who are you? What's your spirit like? Well, they murdered this, in my opinion. In my not so humble at times opinion, they murdered this guy, and they were told to take him out, and they're just a bunch of order following. You know, I had a lot of friends in the military. Don't get me wrong. Okay, I think very highly of human beings in general, but order takers, I've got a little problem with. If you will take orders that go against your own, you know, great spirit-given conscience, you know, where. You know, I had friends in Vietnam, they were told to go do a village cleanup, and that's what they did. They took out everything in the village, everything that walked, crawled, or slithered on one leg. Men, women, babies, children, ducks, geese, goats, pigeons, whatever. And then they burnt everything to the ground, and then they went around snooping, looking for tunnel entrances. Okay? And that's our boys. We're supposed to be the good guys. We're supposed to be the white hats. So this whole giant thing that happened, and I believe it happened. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, Steve Quayle, you know, he might have some ideas I don't agree with or whatever, but I don't think he's going to fabricate this. There's other people that came, the guys involved, the GIs involved, reported to other people too, kind of clandestinely. So I just think they did a hit on the giant, and maybe they wanted his DNA to work with their. They're doing all kinds of stuff. DARPA's doing all kinds of sweet stuff with nanotechnology and their chemtrails and all this wonderful stuff. Now, this big giant that they murdered, to me, that's an abomination what they did. That's probably one of the last of his kind. There might be a few more here and there around the earth. Who knows? But they're definitely a dying breed. And you know, I just think the whole thing with the giants seems to have been, whether it's the Paiutes or whether it's American boys in Afghanistan, seems to be an extermination agenda, you know?
So not only that, but do you believe, with all your research then, because you get the stories, you know, that all these newspaper articles from the 1800s, the early 1900s, that's just sensational journalism. These giants really aren't real. Do you, with your research, do you think there is real? And if they are real, why are they being hidden from us? I mean, I can't see really any purpose. What does it matter if there used to be big giants?
Okay, that's a good question. But considering the way the Catholic Church is hiding the giant, the elongated skulls, and the giant remains on the islands of Malta, and Sardinia, and yet that's all on YouTube. You can check that out. Steve Quayle does and Timothy Alvarino, and a little bit of L.A. Marzulli. And like I said, I'm not totally affirming everything that their entire belief system and all that, but they do some dang good research on the giants and the elongated skulls and the megalithic monuments. Those megalithic monuments are everywhere on the planet. I've done a lot of research on those. And we're talking that big giant stones that fit together like puzzle pieces. They're everywhere. They're Japan. They're China. Japan. One of the best examples of a megalithic dolmen, one of the finest dolmens I've seen, is in Montana. It's like 30 feet tall. The column stones are notched. It's the best dolmen I've ever seen. As far as other megalithic sites, there's Rockwall in Texas. There's a few, but there's not many that I know about in the United States. Most of them are in South America. There's a few in Mexico. Malta's full of them. There's other places. They're all over the place. The Ural Mountains in Russia has one of the biggest sites in the world. They found them in Bosnia along with pyramidal structures. China, you go and look at megalithic structures in China. Boom. Megalithic structures in Japan. Boom. The same type of architecture, the same evidence that they went through a big flood, catastrophe flood, all of them.
Really?
I mean, this is a fact. Just look it up. One of the channels I recommend is Sylvia Ivanova, New Earth channel. She does a lot, megaliths.org. She does a lot of work on this. Now, the giants are directly related with this architecture, okay? Almost everywhere you have native populations that know something about this ancient megalithic architecture, they'll talk about giants.
Huh.
Well, the giants are not to be found, living hardly ever anymore anywhere, but they have been documented up to the 17th century, and then there's this recent one in Afghanistan. The deal is that in the 1800s and early 1900s, I would imagine that if there wasn't any news happening, Sally McGill's cow just gave birth to twins or whatever, they're going to maybe want to fabricate something interesting to put in the paper. But you know what? I'll tell you something. All of your major newspapers now, including some of the small town ones, I know my hometown of Santa Rosa, California, the Press Democrat is now owned by New York Times. Reuters, owned by the Rothschilds, owns all of this, okay? William Randolph Hearst hooked up with them, got funded by the Rothschilds. That's where his major pay ticket came from. Because if you control the media, you control the general mentality of the populace. So in the old days, they would publish all this stuff. Yeah, man, we found 10 9-footers with double dentition, and that was happening all the time back then, Terry.
Yeah, there's a lot of articles. Yeah.
Yeah, and L.A. Marzulli, I got a few head bumps with him about a few things. Basically, I like the guy, and he went to Catalina Island off the coast of California, and they found a lot of giant skeletons and some elongated skulls there. He didn't find them, but another guy did, and L.A. did the library research and came up with a lot of pictures and all that stuff. Yep. So, all right, you know about that. So, all over the place. So, you can't be so judgmental. And the same thing with the giants. The giants, I don't doubt that there was some that were pretty bad guys. Cannibals, quite possibly. Definitely not good guys. But I also believe there was a representative amount of them that were very good guys, just like the one Robert was talking about that came down and wanted a little human companionship before he checked out and went to meet his bakers, And that guy they killed up, the giant they killed up in Kandahar up in Afghanistan, I'm sorry, that was murder. That was, he took out a bunch of our boys, but that wasn't his fault. He was doing what any human should do. He was defending that was his house. That was his cave he lived in. He wasn't bothering nobody. They went up there to mess with him, and they were armed to the teeth and ready to do business, and he sensed that real quick, and he gave them a shot full, and then they came back, and that was all over. But, the Giants, they're going to find more and more stuff, Terry. they haven't found diddly squat yet. Let me tell you, there's stuff that has been kept hidden. I believe Great Spirit has kept it until these times to be disclosed, to be shown, and the truth will come out, and we will know that a lot of the stuff that's in the Bible was very true. You know, I've always, not always, but it's come to my attention through various different people saying it, and it makes perfect sense, so I will repeat it. Keep an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out.